And like I said, you're more than welcome to use this for whatever ends. So, hey, I'm SD. I will be your moderator. The debate is between Perspective Philosophy and Zoom. The general topic is veganism, and of course, it might stem into other things besides just veganism strictly. There is a follow along chat. It is the VC text, as I put in the announcement, so people can type as they feel that they need to. And we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. Without further ado, I don't think that I'm going to have to step in too much here, so I will shut the fuck up and let you guys get right on with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so hi man. Nice to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. Said you wanted a debate. So what is it that you want to discuss, man?
Yeah, I did. It's good to finally meet you. I've been talking in the vegan circuit for a while now. I've seen your name come up. I've seen a few of your videos. I've heard about you from a friend of mine, Shadow Starshine. Yeah, you
Oh,
guys apparently had a podcast together or something
oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Me and Shadow had like a podcast for a while. It was me, Shadow, Dave, and Dio. But that was many a moon ago. That was the philosophy power hour. It was pretty cool, pretty cool. Very different opinions on there, so like very different perspectives and stuff, as you will, if you will. But yeah,
Very different perspectives on philosophy.
yeah, well, on everything pretty much. Especially ethics between me and Shadow and Dave. Like, yeah,
Yeah, so that all sounds good. That all sounds cool. Yeah, so I've wanted to because I realized that my ethics, I believe, lean much more strongly towards shadows than yours. And I
mm,
guess because of that, I've wanted to maybe touch base with you and see if we could have a discussion, see what we if we can reconcile our ideas.
I'm
Thought
sure.
that would be something interesting. So I'm really happy to be talking to you.
I'm sure we can do it better than me and Shadow. We've had like 3 debates so far. So, but yeah,
Right.
so where would you say you're a descriptivist then?
Um Yeah, I don't know the exact word to describe my meta-ethical position or my position on veganism, but yeah, I would say non-cognitivist, moral nihilist, descriptive egoist. I've been called all of these things. I'd say
Right.
they all somewhat accurately describe my viewpoints, but
But
I'm
they
not
couldn't.
comfortable enough to pigeonhole myself as one thing.
I'm just gonna say that they genuinely couldn't, because you can't be an egoist and a moral non-cognitivist. For example, they're incompatible. Um, because an egoist is a form of cognitivism.
Yeah, that makes sense. I probably lean more towards the non-cognitivist side, but
Okay.
I'm still getting a feel for the terminology, so I may end
Yeah.
up accidentally doing that.
Oh no worries, man. Like we'll just take it one step at a time. You know, like uh, we'll have to kind of start somewhere in that. And I know that when like I started as a good Kantian boy, and here I am, like just essentially one step different. so, um, so yeah, like um, so describe your metaethical position then in like ordinary language. Then tell me then what would allow you to differentiate the moral value of, let's say, an animal and a human.
Okay, so before I start, I just want to say that I have you seen my debate with Vegan Gaze or Ellie?
I saw some of it, and I never got. I don't think I finished it. I think I might have, but to be honest, I've been so busy at the minute, and I honestly, I think that was like a few weeks ago, wasn't it? I can't
Yeah,
remember anything from then. I could
right.
barely remember yesterday. So,
No problem, man. So I can go over that, but one thing I did want to make clear is that I am prone to technical difficulties occasionally. So if you I just randomly stop talking, or if you hear like text messages coming in or phones ringing, things like that. I'm really sorry. I'm trying my hardest to keep everything in order, but these things happen sometimes with me.
Honestly, I have no idea about technical difficulties at all. Like, not on this channel. I don't think I've ever had one to date. So you want to get that sorted, really.
I'm sensing sarcasm.
Obviously, yeah, it's obviously sarcasm. I have so many technical difficulties. Don't worry about it, man.
I'm so tempted to chip in, but as the moderator, I'm not supposed to.
I could make technical difficulties mean merch. So anyway, like, yeah, let's just get into it. So what allows you to differentiate the value of an animal and a human then, anyways?
Okay, so without further ado, I will we can get into that. So what allows me to differentiate the value of a human and an animal, I would say, is introspective self-awareness. So perspective philosophy described this fairly well. I'm sure you know it, but I can reiterate it for the audience. So introspective self-awareness is the ability to know that you yourself exist as an individual, to have a sense of I. So like with being a human being, we're born or we develop this sense of self, of an awareness of ourself just naturally, or through the development of language, like through appealing to Wittgenstein.
Yeah,
I would say
I was gonna say you're not gonna go naturally, are you? Because then I'll just pull self-awareness in animals. But like, yeah. So language develops self knowledge, if you will, or identity. Because self-awareness, I think that like there is some contention there, because the term self-awareness can sometimes mean, and I don't get me wrong, I make this exact same like, I don't want to call it mistake, but like the same use of the words, because self-awareness can mean multiple things. If you mean self-awareness as awareness of oneself, as in like being able to pass the mirror test, being aware of oneself as an object of one's experience, that's fair enough. I think animals can actually have that to some degree, like innately. Like, so for example, ants can pass the mirror test, like dogs, pigs,
well, pigs can't.
I think can pigs can't. Is that regardless, I don't really care. But the thing is, I don't see it as necessary for value anyway. But the thing is that I know that many animals can pass the mirror test, and that's supposed to be like a form of self-consciousness, if you will, conscious of oneself. I don't think that matters at all. That really is like, but then there is also self knowledge and greater self-awareness. So like this would be like identity. So this is where I would say like this is where we would talk about something like the establishment of like the I in the Wittgensteinian sense, which allows for something like, which arguably allows for stuff like dyadic memory, the ability to understand oneself through time, the ability to hold oneself constant as an object in one's experience. So separate from your judgment, you're an object in reality. So to objectify oneself. And then be able to obtain knowledge about oneself, that would be a product of language, and I would agree with you. So I don't really see how that, but then obviously that we'll get into why you think that this matters.
Right. So yeah, I think you summed up well that just passing the mirror test is not actually that important to me, or just in general, bodily self-awareness, like to just know that you're, I guess, to have an awareness of that you occupy space in the universe, is
someone's just trying to echo one.
I can
Oh, that's all right. I think it's gone. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so just that thing of occupying space in the universe, I don't think is that valuable, because I think a lot of things have that, like you said, even insects, ants in particular, or just being able to recognize itself. Like you can have a biological programming to recognize yourself that has nothing to actually do with a sense of identity or a personal narrative. So
I mean, self-narrative is exactly where I would say the difference in like narrative itself is a product of language, right? I think we'd all agree.
yeah.
That doesn't mean anything though. Like it's like you being aware of one's narrative versus being a character in one is essentially a separate position, which is why I would pull up the separation between something like agency and patienthood. You know, you can be you could be, you know, you can take a position in a narrative whilst not knowing that you're in that narrative. And that'd be absolutely fine. It means you probably wouldn't have things like hopes and dreams. You know, you wouldn't have existential crisis. You wouldn't have the psychological complexity that, say, like a human or a higher level like linguistic animal may have, but or communicative animal would have. But that's that I don't see as necessary for having moral worth. I just want to know why that would be, you know, morally valuable.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. Okay, who's that going?
Is it? I don't.
The-
Speak again.
Nobody is permitted to speak apart from you two, so it's going to be one of your ends.
Yeah, I was gonna say speak. It might be mine. I'll check.
All right, it's fine if it is. I'll just deal with it. Okay, so I want to explain like why I value being what was, I don't know, remember exactly the word you used, but being the main character in this narrative as opposed to just a just another actor in the story. Why I consider that to be important. Well, I would say because without those hopes, those dreams, those desires, and that like I guess idea of being a protagonist in your own story, I don't see that life as actually being relevant or valuable. Taking that away is not really,
But why?
I would just say that you can't appreciate it. You can't understand what you're even losing. Why do you?
You're a side character in my life. Does that make that like you not important?
No, I'm a character in my own life, though.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, like everyone's experiencing like the narrative is like, so for example, being able to understand the narrative and being able to be the participant in the narrative are two separate things. So like being the experiencer of the narrative, you know, as an animal who's going through their, you know, going through their experience, is their experience and value interactions with the world, whilst being a, you know, aware of that narrative is essentially the meta understanding of that narrative, understanding the narrative and understanding your place within it, understanding that, like, you know, the flow of the story or the, you know, the rhythm of the music, if you will, you know what I mean? Like these are like the kind of judgments that you can make from, you know, the development of language. But this doesn't necessitate that value, you know, like if we talk about ethical value, like that which is leading us to an action, that is leading us to you know, an ought claim is embedded in that. That's what I'm kind of trying to understand. Like, where does the, like, why ought I care about you because you're the main character of your own narrative?
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at is I think that without being the main character of your narrative, you don't know that the narrative even exists, or you don't have the ability to know it exists, to value it, to want it to continue in any meaningful way. You're just part of it. You're essentially like just an NPC.
Yeah, but like, I mean, you could say this about loads of stuff. So for example, I might be unaware, like I could have been raised to be unaware of I don't know, the laws of physics, or like you know, like something like that, but then know how to make a fire. And not knowing how the fire works isn't the value of the fire. The fire and the value of that fire is the heat that it produces, you know? So it's the experience of the fire that I find value, not the knowledge of the fire, if you understand that. So like, now if I'm going to steel man you, and this is Shadow makes a very similar point, except he does it by saying like, essentially that one would not have knowledge of the values at all because it needs to be basically locust. Like there needs to be a point in which those values are made aware to the agent, and the agent would not be made aware of those values until they are self-aware, until they're aware of like that consciousness.
All right. So I'm trying to understand the fire analogy. I'm kind of struggling to see how that's even analogous in this case. Like I don't know if fire has an empirical value.
Well, it's more of the experience of, like, so for example, like the experience of anything positive or negative in one's life, knowledge of that experience isn't what we find valuable. It's useful in terms of future experiences and planning, but it's not the actual value of that experience. I'd say the value of that experience is inherent, unless you think that you actually manifest the value of something like fire, and the warmth and the heat from that, and the good feeling it gives you when you're sat next to it, like on a cold winter's night in the jungle or something. That like a caveman would not have experienced the happiness and warmth of it. Now, the point of what I'm saying is that if I was to steel man you, the argument you're making isn't necessarily one which involves the you'd be basically saying that the values themselves are actually not occurring until the individual can understand them. So that self-awareness allows for not only the understanding of those values, but for the experience of them.
In a way, I think that gets on part of it. I think it's a little more complex than that. So, what I would say is that I do believe that in the present moment, I would say the animal may be experiencing a certain thing, but when it comes, and that's why I guess I would say I value an animal's current experiences in the moment to an extent. Like, I don't think we should go around just torturing animals. You shouldn't just torture a dog because
Right.
it might not have self-awareness.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
so you would say that they do feel pain then, because Shadow would be making the point of what's called higher order consciousness. He's saying that they are not actually consciously aware of those values. So that's the difference. When you said that you're associated with Shadow, I thought that's the argument you were going to make, and that's why you brought it in language. So you're going to have to make an argument about higher order consciousness. So,
Well, I do agree with that. I do believe that they have that they don't feel pain, or that pain takes on a whole new level when it's done to something that's self-aware, or something that has language, versus something that doesn't. But I still believe that the pain or the experiences that the animal feels, even without that self-awareness, in the present moment anyway, is enough to
right.
be granted moral
So,
consideration.
like, the value of one's experience is inherent to the experience itself, and that the experience implies an experiencer who actually feels it. So animals do feel pain.
Yeah,
Okay.
more or less.
And so why would you say that humans feel a greater amount of pain then?
So this kind of comes in more into Shadow's belief system, where if you're able to
Do
experience
you want us to message him and see if he's free if you want, and then if there's anything that you want him to clarify, ask him if he can come on as well if you want.
I'd have no problem with that. It's always nice to have Shadow on, but if he doesn't if he's not interested, if he's busy, we can just talk about this
Oh,
ourselves. But yeah,
that's fine. Yeah. I was just saying, just in case you wanted like clarification, just because it's like because you're saying like you're referencing his sort of style of argument. But to continue.
okay, if you want to invite him though, or you want me to send him a message, I'd have no problem with that. Yeah. Oh, Conan wants to keep it just one-on-one.
Just as a quick point of moderation, not that either of you have overstepped any mark, but like, yeah, if Shadow wants to come in and ask a question when we get to the Q&A, absolutely, no problem at all.
I can at Shadow, and he can join. Maybe he won't be able to talk, and then during the Q&A, he can start asking us questions.
So if he does join, do you want him unmuted so that he can speak freely? Because
I guess we'll see.
In this channel, everybody is muted when they come in.
So we can how about we'll just see what happens when he comes. Like when if and when he shows up, we can see just what happens and where the discussion is.
Well, like for the time being,
Sure.
I'm going to soldier on, and
yeah.
And so you agree that value is instanced in an animal, so they have the experience of positive and negative, even if they don't have, a narrativistic understanding of that, but that it is made greater to the point of moral consideration within a human. Is that correct?
Could you repeat that again? I think that was a little had a hard time following. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. So an animal has an experience of positive and negative, which is an experience of value, but that value is not morally considerable until it is within a human whose experience is more complex, and so the value itself is of a greater moral degree, like of something that's actually considerable.
Okay, I think I understand. Yeah, I would say that a human's experience of the world, you tell me if this is not a valid answer. So I would say a human's experience of the world, or at least a self-aware creature, I prefer to say, because like keep continuously scale it up and find middle ground, but that a human's experience of the world has more moral worth than an animal's experience of the world. But I still think an animal's experience of the world, at least in terms of torture and pain, is worth something.
Okay. And that's
It's
in relation to the pain in which there's experienced in their life. So you would ground ethics in like pain and pleasure, yeah?
Yeah, to an extent, I would.
And then you would probably say that pain and pleasure is amplified within the life of a human or a self-aware creature.
I would say so.
Okay. And that's because of the psychological complexity that is being brought around by language.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I was to make the argument that the psychological complexity that's brought around by language allows for both the amplification and diminishment of pain, and so the value that is experienced can be modified by being self-aware, but is not necessarily amplified, but also can be diminished by self-awareness. And I would give the example of something like Stoicism, or those Buddhist monks who set themselves on fire. I would say that those examples show that an individual can do what's called psychological disassociation, and that is a feature of language and psychological complexity, which is present in verbal creatures. So why would, let's say, an individual have greater moral consideration in a given circumstance? Let's say they were going to get murdered, when they may actually feel less negative experience.
Okay, so there's a lot of reasons for this, and I have a few things to say. So for one, I would not agree with you that stoicism or something along those lines necessarily diminishes pain in the way the way you're talking about. I think what it does is it inhibits self-awareness and inhibits our language abilities that create that narrative, which animals already lack. They don't need to inhibit that. They don't have it, period. So I would say what humans do is we start by having it, and we just push it down. We repress it as best as
I've never heard that before. Why do you think that?
Because what I think is that being a human, you just always will have this narrative. It comes to you just completely naturally. There's no real way to 100% escape it. I mean, you can try, but it's really hard for me to conceive of a person like existing but not having any sense of self or any sense of personal narrative. Like, I don't even know what that would look like. It's inconceivable.
But I mean, like, in a moment-to-moment basis, you can be conscious of that narrative or not. And that, I mean, in phenomenology, there's a very famous author called Heidegger who talks about two separate states of being. And I use this all the time, so probably SD's probably going to get sick of all the things that he's heard over and over again. But there's what's called a ready-to-hand state and a present-to-hand state. And I think that he makes a very good point. Let's say if you take an individual riding a bike, and when they're riding that bike, they experience the rhythm of the the pedaling. They're very in the moment, and they're in a flow, if you will. And in that, they're not thinking about the bike. They're not thinking about pedaling. They are just pedaling, and they're not really contemplating the world around them. in a way that would be analytic.
So
And then you've got a present at hand state, which would be the individual thinking about pedaling or thinking about how the bike works or thinking about what a bike is. And that might actually inhibit them from the experience of, like, riding that bike. Now, one of the things that is unbelievably understood is the fact that the ready to hand state can be conditioned through language, and even our unconscious can be conditioned through language. And I would agree with this. That's Lacan, if you will. Like he's the unconscious is structured like a language. Now I agree with that, but even if the unconscious is structured like a language, that doesn't necessitate that it's narrativistic. It just shows that the individual has, let's say, experiences the phenomena and not unconditioned experience, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean that value is not present in the phenomena. And I would even go so far to say that language would not have formed unless there was value if there wasn't value in the unconditioned experience. And I would go further again to say that language wouldn't even function if there wasn't value in the unconditioned experience. So yeah, we can kind of go from there, if you will.
All right. So so that was also a little bit complex for me. So
That's fine. I will break anything down that you like. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I want to discuss how we so are you saying that the when they're in that state, I don't remember quite the name, but when they're riding the bike and they're not focusing on the world around them, the mechanics of the bike, would you say there's any language involved in that, or would you say that's completely
I'd say there was language involved.
self-aware?
No, I'd say there's language involved.
Okay, so I think that's what I'm getting at, is I think even in that state, there is still a sense of self, like a sense of like, I'm riding the bike. I feel the wind blowing on me. This is my body. Like, even if you're not really making, it's not like a first order value that you're focusing on, that still is just always permeating in your conscious, always permeating in your experience of life. And that's what I think is so important, that self-aware creatures have, that I don't really
I mean,
exist.
bodily awareness, we agreed, could be non-linguistic anyway. Like it could be like conceptual, like, like what we're talking about when we talk about identity is like the I, which is like understanding oneself through time. I don't think that necessarily, like, I don't think like if you feel the wind hit your skin, you don't place upon that experience inherently I and the wind and so on like that. You experience the values, and those values are, don't get me wrong, I would say like laden with meaning already. So as soon as you see them, as soon as you perceive them, there is a perceptual kind of engagement with it, and an understanding of it is what's the word, like determinate objects. And I think that's probably the best example of what you're trying to say. So like, if I may, like when you're pedaling on your bike and you look around, you don't see indistinguishable the indistinguishable totality in Levinas, kind of like in Levinasian terms. So like you don't see like the infinite experience, that thing that is merged together, that is one experience from which you feel all over your body. You can distinguish aspects of that experience linguistically by nature. You inherently have already split the world off into little characterized objects of experience. So you're like, oh look, a seat, and like you don't even when you perceive the seat, it mightn't be narrativistically, but you see a seat, you see a determinate object. Now I would agree that the determination and objectification exists in like a ready to hand state, but that doesn't necessitate that you but then we've already agreed that animals feel pain and pleasure. So like even if they didn't differentiate those like objects, they would still experience the benefit or the harm of them. But I would even go so far to say that like animals to function would need to distinguish them to some degree through like some sort of natural process, even if they're unaware of like in terms of knowledge claims. Like, but yeah, continue.
All right. So I wanted to first clarify. You said bodily awareness, and I wasn't even trying to focus too much on bodily awareness. Like even if they feel the wind and the sun, I still think there has to be a sense of an understanding that I'm getting hit by this sunlight. I'm feeling this wind, the I. So there's
Why?
always going to be this lingual element, this self-aware element to just whatever it is you're doing, even if you're not trying, it just comes fundamentally to you
But even if
as a
we said
person.
that, even if we said that about humans, why would that matter? Like, why would the I instantiate higher value?
Okay, so I told you that when it comes to that I, it then feeds into this idea of the personal narrative. And that narrative is still functional as long as the I exists. So there is so since there is that I, there is that sense of self, that self-awareness that exists from the simple fact of being human. That is what I value, and that is what I think leads to the appreciation and the understanding and the value of one's life that I think should be respected in an ethical system.
See, I just don't understand that because, from what I understand, it's like you ground it in experience. You say the animals have that same experience, or at least have an experience which is considerable. Um, then you say that like the difference is the psychological complexity of the creature. All right, we're more psychologically complex, so we'll have a greater experience of those values, like pain and pleasure.
So, oh, you back, Lewis?
He's like right. Hang on, I need to manually unmute him.
Ah,
Oh,
what happened there?
okay.
If you disconnect and rejoin, you get muted on join. So I just unmuted
Ah,
you.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if I don't know how I've disconnected. But
Probably a glitch. Don't worry about it.
what did you hear last, mate?
I heard last you were saying something about the animals have an experience
Oh,
and
right. So
similar to
like with
yeah.
animals, you agree that animals feel pain and pleasure. Then you say that okay, but that's not as considerable as human pain and pleasure because they're not aware of it. And I was like, fair enough. So like, there's some form of psychological complexity that gives like a greater value experience to those self-aware agents. And I said, like, why do you think that? Um, and then you say, um, you know, that this life narrative is constantly running, and then you appeal to the value of the narrative itself, and you say that I value that life narrative, and it's like right, but the value of the narrative is the value of one's experience within the narrative, and you're saying that the value of like a human narrative versus a an animal's raw experience is greater and more like experienced to a greater degree because of psychological complexity. Now, what I want to know is why you think the psychological complexity means that there is a greater amount of value and where you're getting that conclusion from.
Okay, so I want to clarify because I think this needs to be stated before we can move on and continue that I believe that torture, like the act of purposely causing an animal pain, like I guess stabbing a cow with a hot poker,
Mm-hmm.
like pressing it on its flesh is different than the pain that that you give it by painlessly ending its life. All right, well, I can't even call that pain because it's painless. It would be the
Well, I
suffering.
mean, yeah, I mean, like if you can painless, I mean, if they do painlessly end their lives, but they usually don't. But whatever, man. Like, we'll look past that. Like, that's another point. Let's say, like, what you're saying is that like you could end like if I was to steel man you here, it looks like you're trying to appeal to the idea that ending like it's that they do have moral consideration, but ending their life narrative is not is not unconsiderable to them because they lack psychological continuity.
Yeah, that's what I largely state, is that the ending an animal's life is on a different level than than causing something torture in the present moment. The torture in the present moment is not okay, but the ending the life is morally neutral due to the lack of personal narrative. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, Armin Navabadi has that exact same argument, and it's something that him and Cosmic Skeptic agreed on. Except Cosmic Skeptic basically said that, like the way in which we approach animals now does cause them suffering in the moment, and they are aware and psychologically aware of each other to a degree in which they recognize each other's, like damage to each other. So, like when you take calves away, arguably from cows, like the calves feel distress from being away from their mothers. The mothers can feel distress from being away from the calves, that kind of thing, and that could be even instinctual. Other animals feel exactly the same sort of stuff, or at least so we think. So, like obviously, the way in which we kill animals for meat, dairy, and eggs now, I wouldn't say is anywhere along those lines anyway. But let's say we say like painless killing in this vacuum where like, all right, there's been an animal, it's never met anyone else, it's just living its life, and then it gets donked on their head, and it never saw it coming, and it never felt a thing. I guess like there's two things, like there's a few things to consider in this. So one, the value of a life narrative. Like we'll get onto that one in a second, because like actually, you know what? Actually, we'll go the life narrative route, and then I'm just going to write this down. We need to get back on the psychological complexity one. So psychological complexity.
It's complicated.
It's just to make sure that we just don't miss any points. So right now we'll go on a life narrative, right? So like the value of a life narrative. So what's the value of a life narrative? Because I would say that the value of a life narrative is the totality of experience of one within that life. So that to make sense of the narrative itself is not an abstract universal in which we say life itself is valuable, but rather that the experience of value by that agent within the the totality of that life is what we are valuing.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. I think that is a valid reason to understand life and to think that life is meaningful. But I would say mine is a little more complex. I think I hear what you're saying, and I actually do agree with it to some extent. But I think what makes it, in my mind, actually valuable is you need another factor. You need a recognition, and that's not a word. You need to recognize that you have those experiences, that you appreciate them, that you want them to continue. That, in my mind, is important. You have to have that value and that understanding.
Yeah, but you experience everything in the same like, so even when you experience dyadic, something through time. So like anticipation, for example, is what you're describing. You're anticipating an experience, or you're hoping for an experience, or you're dreading an experience. They modify the life narrative. So if an individual is living a life of hopefulness, we could say that he is living a better life than if he lived a life of dread. But hope and dread are experienced in the moment. They aren't experienced outside of the narrative. Do you see what I mean? So the value of the narrative is still the experience of the agent within the narrative, or the individual within the narrative.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but it has to do with the abstract thought that you may experience it in the present moment, but you can apply it to your future, you can apply it to your past.
Mm-hmm.
You can understand the narrative and how these feelings can permeate throughout it. And that is what, in my mind, is valuable. And that's what separates us from the intellectual abilities of farm animals, is that they can't.
Why is it valuable? That's what I keep asking. That's because I'm like, well, hope and dread and fear, like, existential crisis, they're all things that you experience in the moment, right? And they're values because like the value itself, unless you're trying to say that they're valuable outside of something like pain and pleasure. And then we're going to get into like why it's valuable. And I'm just going to Hume's guillotine the shit out of you. So like, are you going to keep it as a functional concept? And what we're talking about is like the experience of the agent and the drive that's already within them? or are you going to say that it's or are you going to say that this is valuable in like an abstract sense?
Okay, so I would say that so you're essentially just asking me like how do I like what's leading to this to me feeling this way? Why do I value understanding your life, understanding that narrative? And the answer to that would just be it's an axiom for me. I just do. That's just
Okay,
how I
and I'm just going to say that is assumed, and so I can dismiss it as just wrong. We
Okay.
can't just assume philosophy. That's just wrong.
Okay, Lewis. So it seems like we're getting into the next section of our debate of meta ethics, of are morals real or not? Are ethical
Even if morals aren't real, you can't do that.
Okay, I don't know how you can assert that rule.
Yeah, because what you've just said something is. What I'm going to say is that you've said that it's an axiom. So what do you mean by an axiom?
Okay, it's an ethical intuition that I have. I feel that
not an
this is the way I want to be. This is the way I want the world to be.
So an axiom is usually like is something that is like either postulated or assumed. A lot of the time, like it's used like the sort of dictionary-ish definition, and it's usually allowed for like the argument to function, or it's fundamental and it's it must be the case. So like an axiom is like true in and of itself. Like so, for example, like the law of non-contradiction, Aristotle would argue that is an axiom of everyone's experience. Do you know what I mean? But the like saying like my judgment of this situation in ethics is correct because I could make the axiom everything that I say is right, and then when you say like like Lewis, like you're killing people, this is wrong, and I go no it's not, and then you go how do you know that? Because I just said killing people wasn't wrong if I do it. That's my axiom. And it's just what it is just asserting a conclusion. It's a level of inductive reasoning in order to justify your position. And if I'm honest, and this isn't a jab at you, this is a jab at the entire internet who do this. This is bad philosophy. Everyone needs to stop doing this. Every philosopher I've ever talked to that's done academic philosophy thinks this is really bad. Please stop. It's just like like even like look, even if we go like non-cognitivist, if you go non-cognitivist, then the axioms don't exist because then what you're actually proposing is something which is a norm or which otherwise would be which doesn't exist in terms of the Frege. Have you ever heard of the Frege-Geach problem?
I've heard you mention it. I believe you mentioned it in your Vosh debate, but I don't quite remember exactly what it is.
Yeah, so the Frege-Geach problem or the Frege-Geach embedding problem is an argument which basically shows that language needs to be essentially it relies upon the commonality of language to show that any given understanding of the world, any normative understanding of the world, especially in terms of this psychological complexity in this language, which you're talking about in the first place, needs to exist between agents. So that's not private to any given individual. Otherwise, I mean, hell, in this argument, if you say that private language exists, I'm just going to tell you that all animals have private language and and have the psychological complexity of humans anyway. But we just can't communicate with them, and there's no reason to doubt it. But
okay.
but the way language functions, and this is the Wittgensteinian argument, is essentially the language cannot be private. Language exists in a way that needs to be separate from the interpretation. And so if you interpret, let's say you had a premise that was
you're really going on a really long tangent here. Can we cut this off and just like address this one by one?
Yeah, of course. We'll just break it down one by one. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just I'm not saying it's wrong or it's bad philosophy or that you're being like a sophist or anything. I'm just saying it's a lot of stuff and we should address
yeah, that's fine. Okay. I'll actually, just for anyone who's interested as well, I'll get up a little article on the Frege-Geach embedding problem. So if you're interested after this and you want to read about the Frege-Geach embedding problem, then you can. Yet to find anyone who's come up with a solution.
So I want to talk to you, Lewis, about the axioms in particular, because that's how this started. And then we
Yes.
can get onto the Fredin Geeche problem.
Frege Geach. It's all right. It's German. So, if you go on this article here, it's called. I'll link it on Discord. Would it be like VC chat? Yeah.
VC
So I'll read you
text
this.
is
VC text,
what's being followed.
Sweet. Zoom. So if you check out there, it's 4.1, and it's the embedding problem. Essentially, that meaning itself needs to be embedded in something which is normative and exists between agents. And so when you try to say that, like, you're a non-cognitivist, but then try to propose a norm, then you're essentially trying to say that something, like, that you value something, but then you have no reason to say that you value that. And so you cannot make judgments about your non-cognitive states. You can merely express them. And that's essentially what the conclusion of the Frege embedding is.
Okay, so I presume this has something to do with the moral So I was gonna say that when it comes to axioms, I think we may be using them a little differently, because you're referring to axioms as things like the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, and the law of identity, things like that, things we can't function without. So maybe the way that it is used, that the word axiom is used in academic circles, and I respect that for sure, but I would just say that in internet debates of this nature, like those philosophical debates, it is used a little differently, axioms, to just mean a fundamental, irreducible idea that somebody has. And that is how I'm using it.
Well, that's fair enough. I was just going to say that people do use it in that sense in academics. They just like, all right, we're gonna, but they'll point out that it's an assumption. They're like, I'm going to assume, and when when you assume, you're in the situation where the individual can just reject your assumption and then say you're question begging, and then ask you to prove it. Now,
and that's what I would say is, Lewis, I would go as far as to say that you can, like, you gave the example that you can have an axiom that killing people isn't wrong, and you'll have no way of disproving them if that's their axiom. That is something I believe to be true. That's a natural consequence of moral relativism to me. Is that people can hold axioms that to me are completely insane. But if that is truly what they believe, and that is truly how they consistently ground themselves in the world and their behaviors, I have no way to disprove them.
The Frege embedding problem, and the reason I brought it up, is to show there's no way to show that you're being actually consistent in your understanding of that axiom in the first place.
Okay, well, let's get into that then. Let's get into the problem and see if how it's and let's see if we can hash it out.
Yeah. So
I unfortunately read this whole thing right now in the middle of this discussion. So could you give me like the just the skinny on it?
Yeah, essentially, the Frege embedding problem asserts that normativity exists between agents, and so anything that was non-cognitive, which would be private to that experience of the individual, so something that you alone experience, would be incommunicable through language, and so you could not understand it in a way to create a normative structure and a quote-unquote system from that. So this would be, so like you would, like, if you go, my axiom is that I like chocolate cake, and therefore every Sunday I will eat chocolate cake, and then you build up like a set of like secondary premises, from them. That would be able to be dismissed by someone who says you do not like chocolate cake, and there is no way to show that either of us are correct if we abide by your assumption, and so
They don't.
it's absurd.
What does that matter, Lewis? Who
Because
cares?
it's absurdity,
I
which
know
means
that
that there
you
is
do.
no truth. Which means, so if you don't care about truth, then why we're debating?
Where did you get that from? I don't know where you got the idea I don't care about truth. It
Because you
is
said,
true.
why do I care about absurdity?
No, it's not absurdity, is what I'm saying. I think that person who would say you don't like chocolate cake is just wrong. They're just misinformed. If it's
How are
like
they wrong?
because I know that I like chocolate cake, I know I have that intuition.
How do you know you have that intuition?
I know, and it doesn't matter if they deny it. It doesn't matter if I jump up and
It is. How do you know?
gravity. Lewis, can I speak? Okay, so I'm saying it doesn't matter if you deny that gravity exists. You jump up and down, you will still fall. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you deny that I have an axiom. That axiom still exists within me, and if you just deny it, you're wrong. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, except with the gravity, scenario, you pointed to a form of realism, something that exists between us that we can point to and go, "Oh, gravity exists because of X," and show sufficient reason for it. But in terms of, let's say, your axiom, you can't do that. That's the point.
Okay, but I would say that doesn't matter. It was just an analogy. It's not like really supposed to be exactly exactly fit. I agree it could have been better. And I agree there is a difference between a physical point of some physical material law of nature and an immaterial idea in your mind. But I would still just say it doesn't matter. That as long as you have that intuition, that's all you need to say it's true. And if someone denies you have that intuition, they're just wrong. And that's the end of it. And I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that.
No, but what I'm saying is like your understanding of that intuition could change. So your understanding of those feelings that you have can change, and you would not even know it.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, it does, because if you're building up a quote unquote system from that, if it's a pure expression, if you're like, ow, or like, or like you cry, then fair enough, and it's an expression. Then all it is an emotional state that is being non-cognitively expressed between individuals, and then you're an expressivist, and then we can debate on why you think expressivism is true. Now, as a non-cognitivist, what I'm going to say is that as a non-cognitivist, I'm going to say that you're going to have to, if you're going to try and make a system, like the two thinkers that I would say that are probably closest to you, and you might want to read up on them, because it seems like it might help you out in terms of like being able to express your position, would probably be Stevenson and Blackburn. So that's like norm expressivism and quasi-realism in metaethics. So they argue essentially that you, and this is what I'm thinking that you're arguing, that you would have this irreducible sort of like attitude or emotional state. Let's say I like cake, and then from that you would be able to dictate your life based on that attitude. So you'd be like, right, so because I don't like cake, and like because I don't like cake, I shouldn't go and eat cake. And then also, if I don't like cake, but I also really like chocolate, then I need to work out whether I'm going to like chocolate cake and whether those norms combine and contradict each other in terms of my understanding and how I live my life.
Okay, so that was a little I thought I was understanding at the beginning. At the end, it got a little confusing for me. I'm gonna try and take it one at a time,
That's fine.
as I've usually done. So I guess I'll just have to ask why does it matter if it might change? Like say the your value like changes, like I decide I like chocolate cake, and then I will decide maybe 10 years from then I don't like chocolate cake. What is the problem with that? Then I just change. And because it's still
I see the confusion. I see the confusion because you think that I mean that it could just change through time. I mean that you would never actually know what it was in the moment in which you experience it. And the reason, like, so for example, here's the example they give on the embedding problem on Stanford Encyclopedia, which I just give, which is it is true that lying is wrong. and that let's say that's the axiom, right? It's true that lying is wrong. Lying is not wrong. I wonder whether lying is wrong. I believe that lying is wrong. Fred believes that lying is wrong. Is lying wrong? If lying is wrong, then he will surely do it. If lying is wrong, then to do it is misleading and telling the truth, right? And the whole point of what he's saying is that in every one of those sentences, right, the word lying, right, or wrong. Actually, let's take wrong because lying's a thick moral concept. It's going to be more confusing. The word wrong loses. It could mean very different things. Like, what do you mean by that value judgment? Is like what does the word wrong mean? In that, and so you're going to need something that's objective from your interpretation to understand that word. The other example they give: if tormenting the cat is bad, then getting your little brother to do it is bad. Tormenting the cat is bad. Ergo, your little brother, getting your little brother to torment the cat is bad. Now, the whole point is that you wouldn't understand bad or anything in the like, or tormenting the cat is bad, quote unquote, is the same in the second premise as the first premise. And so the argument can't function. There's no normativity there. There'd be no way for you to go, tormenting the cat means, and then you would reference something in reality, because the referential point of the statement exists privately in your interpretation. And so you would never be able to fundamentally know whether you are right or not.
Okay, so Lewis, I feel like I haven't had much of a chance to speak here. So I would like to explain what I believe. So this is what I will say, is that I would argue the intuition is is enough to ground that. Just saying, I believe in this thing, this is what I believe bad is, would be enough, because that is what you think bad is, or at least what you think bad is. And that alone will be able to ground it. That alone will be able to create a judgment about this. And it doesn't, if it's not a true reflection because it exists inside yourself, I guess you could argue it, maybe it just doesn't matter, because it's like, if you think that's what it is, or that's how you interpret it, that's enough. That's the answer, or the relevant answer anyway.
I mean, like, this is the thing. I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, okay. So is this only for morality, or is this for every epistemic field? So every point of knowledge. So can I say whether the world is flat or not is a matter of my intuition?
No, of course not.
Why not?
Okay, so I would base that then on a physical attribute. Again, remember we talked about the physical laws of the world? So let's say that the physical laws, we can measure them, and we can see we can see them here. I'm trying to find a way that I can explain this. That if it is a material law and we can look at it, we can measure it, and we can see it outside ourselves. What?
Sorry about that. Someone just donated. I didn't realize. Sorry. Thank you very much for the donation, though.
Yeah, so like I'm saying, if you see the physical laws, are demonstrable outside of yourself. Like, you can't really deny, you don't have to, like, you can't deny really that the mathematics that come behind the world, if you follow the rules of them, that come down to why we think the earth is round.
Why can't you deny it? Like, I could just say that the physics, like, my intuition on the laws of physics and let's say the laws of, like, logic is purely based off whatever I feel.
Okay, so
right. Hang
listen,
on, just one moment. I hate to be that kind of mod who just interjects and tells you what the time is, but you guys have been going for around an hour and a half. So I was just wondering how much longer you wanted to keep going before we move to the Q&A.
Okay, let's do a half hour, because people are roasting me in the VC text and saying I don't understand meta ethics. So I kind of want to establish my position here.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Like, I wasn't trying to shut it down. I was just going to say, just reminding you of the time.
Okay. As in, to be fair, I don't understand meta ethics, so I wouldn't worry about it. If you did understand it, you wanna be You're only writing like journal articles and stuff.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that you could, so yeah, SD, just maybe a half hour more would be kind of nice, just for around 2 hours.
Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't trying to shut you down. Either of you, just go ahead. Just reminding you of the time and that we do need to have Q&A because there are lots of people who want to ask questions. Go right ahead.
Yeah, like, so go for it, man.
Okay. So your answer is maybe my intuition is that the laws of physics are all bullshit and the rules that govern the natural world are all fake. And that's just my intuition. You're saying someone could believe that.
I'm
Right?
saying, yeah, this is so I'm saying that like you need to be able to give a reason why your intuition in terms of, let's say, something like ethics holds, like, what's the word, epistemic weight, uh but it doesn't in something like science or mathematics or history or geography or something like that.
So here's what I'm saying is that I would say that the rules are demonstrably true. Believing in them is subjective. So, like, for example, you can, like, the gravity, as we were talking about before, exists whether we want to believe in it or not. Choosing to believe in gravity and like convince yourself it's fake, that is where that is an ethical stance, or at least a similar ethical stance, similar to ethics, and you can reject that. And I don't think you could refute someone. Like if you met an honest to God solipsist who truly didn't believe anything was real and thought it was all fake, or a schizophrenic person who was convinced gravity didn't exist.
Schizophrenia is different though. It's a bit like, I mean, like so for example, like, an honest to God solipsist might be running an argument which is normative, in which case they're making a knowledge claim. But that's the whole point. So I mean, like, look, this is the thing: a schizophrenic person experiences the world in such a way that it's no longer coherent to them. So like a lot of and I mean, depending on how you look at it, that sense of self is breaking down. If you take like the R.D. Lang kind of like recognitional kind of understanding of things, and so their understanding of reality is breaking down and becoming morphed into that like imagination, and so they're losing grip on what is reality and what is imagination, and they usually get like fixated upon like significations, like signifiers, and then attribute like aspects of those signifiers to reality when it's actually their imagination. So they'll be like, this, like, there was a guy that's like, it's like, you can watch the interview on YouTube. It's like, this means, like, he's holding his two fingers up and he goes, this means homosexual. And so when I see people walking down the street doing this, they're indicating to each other that they are homosexual. And he's like, totally like, paranoid about this. And I'd say that is a separation between that and something like solipsist who goes like, look, no, like here is my reasons for why I believe the world, I'm the only person in the world. And the real separation in there is not simply the endorsement of the agent, but the objectification of the argument as a knowledge claim, as something like true justified belief free from relevant falsehood, if we're going to make the Gettier clause. You know what I mean? And so
Okay.
when I say you can't have knowledge of yourself, it's that you can have the intuition. I'm not denying you have the experience that you think you're right. I'm saying right and wrong are not determined by an individual. If you follow.
I do agree with that. I'm saying that has nothing to do with your perspective of right and wrong. Even if you're wrong, if you want to convince yourself you're right, I could never prove you wrong. That's what I'm trying to say, is that
You
that
could,
ability
you
to
could, but
accept
you could never necessarily. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Okay, continue.
I think you could prove us wrong, but whether I choose to accept your proof or not, like, is separate. So it's like, so for example, someone could choose to believe that gravity doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been proved without, relevant falsehood. It just means that they are, being irrational.
Yes, I would agree. That's what I'm trying to say is I'm saying you don't need to be rational necessarily. That in itself is an arbitrary intuition.
It's not arbitrary. I would say it's the way you think. I would say it's a necessity and it's something that you desire. And so when people don't do that, I would say that they're actually committing an act of self-harm or self-destructing, and which is why I would consider something like schizophrenia something that we need to help people overcome.
Lewis, that's arbitrary. Why
It's,
do you have to? Who cares that it's your Who cares that's the way you think? I don't want to follow that.
it's not the way I think, it's the way it is.
No, who cares if it is the way it is? I reject it. Why do I need to follow rational thinking? You see, that is arbitrary to say it may be true. You don't have to recognize that it's true. That's arbitrary. That's what I'm saying. That recognition of the truth. So there is truth. You just don't need to recognize it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the word need. So it's like you have volition to reject it. But when you see the words like need, should, these are normative positions in the first place, which are ethical in origin and relate back to what you ought to do in the world. And so when I say like someone is schizophrenic and ought to be treated, I mean because that is actually in their best interests.
No, but Lewis, this is what I'm saying is those are arbitrary. You don't have to.
It's like look at it like this. Like you don't have to believe that physics exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to believe in any of the physical claims of the universe, like like Newton's laws of was it the laws of thermodynamics or something like that. You don't need to believe in that, like the conservation of energy, none of that. You don't have to. But it is the case. We can show it is the case based on rational, justified, true justified belief without excluding relevant falsehood. We have the argumentation to make that claim. Okay. And so your lack of belief in that is really separate from whether you ought or ought not believe in it. So so if I go, you should believe in it, and then you go, well, wait a minute, I don't want to. I say that I don't care what you want to do. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
please let me, can I speak? Because I want to say that in itself, that desire for you to say, I don't care, you ought to do this, that is an arbitrary value in my mind of your own ethical system that we ought to accept what is real. We ought to believe in normative facts.
Yeah,
I don't think.
Okay, I'm going to ask you why this is arbitrary. I'm going to keep asking why until we get bottom out.
Okay, that's fine. And I can keep answering because there's nothing really justifying it if you reduce it far enough. It just comes down to your intuition.
I absolutely disagree. I think that normativity itself, like if you look at it like they get into something like Freudian skepticism, you end up going so far with skepticism where you could stop believing in reason. And it's like the fundamental like tenets of reality. And in which case, you've dismissed your own skepticism. So
no, Lewis, I've heard this argument before. I know what you're saying, that you dig yourself into this hole and then you're just infinitely skeptic. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've heard that before. I understand that position and I agree with you. That is absurd. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that if somebody wants to be absurd and wants to talk nonsense and wants to reject logic like a crazy person and just believe in falsehoods, you can do that. I can't tell you not to do that. Well, if somebody says, I don't...
I can tell you not to. It's just whether I can't make you not do it.
Yeah, and I don't think I can even explain to you why it's a bad thing to not do that.
Oh, I can explain why it's a bad thing. I just don't think I can explain, like, I can explain why it's a bad thing in relation to what you are and your understanding of reality and so on. For the fact that you've already went down this route of trying to reject reason shows that you've already accepted the normativity. It's like the whole point of what Aristotle points out in, like, book, like, what was it, like book 5, I think it is, like where he says like you cannot deny the principle, maybe book 4, you cannot deny the principle of non-contradiction. And the whole point of when he's arguing this is to say that every time you do try to do it, you end up using the principle of non-contradiction. So the whole point of what I'm saying is that the very way in which you think will require this reason. When you try to reject reality, you are going to instantiate it more. And the funny thing is your argument relies on this, because you said yourself that you couldn't imagine a person who does not have a sense of self, a person who does not have, in some respect, a level of linguistic conditioning of the world. Now, I accept that. I completely accept that. And that's a form of normativity. And so they cannot free themselves from it because it is what they are. Now, that is
Wait,
actually Wittgenstein.
let me speak.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I agree with you. I agree that this makes sense. I agree with Aristotle. I think what you're saying is completely rational. I'm saying that thing, you can choose to reject that. You can choose to reject that and be crazy. That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying you can't.
Okay, I don't know how you can say that if you can just say you can just call that person crazy and it's absurd. I agree with you, but what's really stopping them from doing that? From
Because
just saying,
they think they are rejecting it, but every time they reject it, they are actually like proposing it. So every time they go, I do not believe in logic, their very words are I believe in logic. Like
okay,
embedded in the meaning of their words is logic. So
that
every
doesn't
time they try to speak,
intuition is
every time they
still
try to say something,
okay. It seems like your fanboys have taken over the voice chat and they're circle jerking each other.
what are you
So
talking about? Voice chat. We're the only ones in here.
excuse me, the voice the voice VC text.
Okay, like if I can
Look,
just
don't care about
intervene
chat.
for just a moment, like just a moment, everything's good. I was saying that I think if you guys could maybe wrap this up in some way, because we do need to go to Q&A, otherwise it'll be a really, really long discussion that never ends. So if you guys want to make some closing points, that's completely fine. I think everybody was in favor of Q&A. I think Perspective, you were in favor, and so you Zoom. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can do a quick Q&A. That's all right.
Yeah, definitely. I think I need to clarify some of my positions.
Yeah, have a couple of minutes each.
Rated now.
Even if you want like a couple of minutes before the Q&A, grab yourself a tea or something. I'll wait. That day.
No, I don't need that. Let's just do it.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, from my understanding of this debate, you've agreed that animals feel and experience value within that world, but it's in the world, but it's not as morally considerable as humans. Because, and for two reasons, humans have a greater overall complexity in their experience, which allows them to experience greater value in terms of pain and pleasure, but also that they can create a life narrative, and that life narrative has value because of the aspirations, hopes, and dreams, those those understandings of value, which they can place upon experience through time to a greater degree.
Okay.
And
So
I'm sorry, I'm still going. um, so I think that I think the understanding that animals experience value is absolutely necessary, even for the understanding that humans could experience value through language. I'd say that the understanding of value in language is only possible because it exists in in an unconditioned state, in the quote unquote real. And so I would say that it's not produced by language, in which we agree. So I don't know why the complexity of the individual necessitates that they feel more of that value. It simply allows them to identify that value and understand it. I would go on to say that the psychological complexity of a human can be greater and can allow for greater suffering, but also can allow for alleviation of that suffering and also greater forms of well-being in cases. It also can lead to greater forms of dread and terror and awful things. So we could say that an individual's life narrative was overall a negative because of that psychological complexity. They faced fear and depression, crippling mental illness their whole life because of existential issues. And then what we are valuing in that life is apparently not the concept. I would say we don't value necessarily the concept of that life. We don't like that the individual places upon it. we value the experience of the life. We value what the life narrative is and not what the person thinks it is. So we value the the whether the individual does feel pain and pleasure in that scenario, what they would continue go on and feel. And so when we consider animals throughout time, we don't assume that just because they don't understand the future, that their future doesn't matter. The future matters to them, whether they realize it or not. And then last thing is when in relation to the irreducible axiom from which you intuitionally claim that human life or like was it self-conscious beings have a greater value, I think it was. I would say that it's question begging. I would say that the way that you try to overcome that criticism was to go into something that's called Freudian skepticism, to doubt rationality itself. And
I didn't do this, by the way.
you can reply in a second. And if you want to argue that ethics is epistemologically different, then that's what you need to do. You need to go and argue for a form of error theory or something like that to establish moral non-cognitivism in the first place, and then I'll hear you out. But to say that it's my intuition is, if I'm honest, just question begging, and it's special pleading in terms of ethics. So yeah, I hope that. Thank you for the debate, and yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Okay, so now I can Okay, so
take as much time as you need to respond and close off.
Okay, I will just say that I think what Lewis is suggesting, that their future matters even if they don't know it, is incoherent to me. I don't think that can really matter, that something that can never have an understanding of its future, can never have a value of its future, can never have an appreciation of its future, could have a valuable future. To me, that is just not a concept that I can buy. It's not a concept that I find very compelling or convincing. And I think humans always have a value of their future, even if they try to or not, just from simply having self-awareness. And I think I've explained this pretty well, or at least as well as I could before, like an hour and a half ago. So if you I don't know what else I can really say besides just reiterating that. Metaethically, I think I'm getting kind of lambasted a little bit, and people are assuming a lot of things about me and about my ideas that I don't actually hold. So what I'm saying is that the choice to be rational or not is subjective, but rationality does empirically exist. Humans empirically do have rational thoughts, I would say. And the laws of nature, I would believe, are empirically true. All I would say is that your choice to believe in that, to be wrong, to contradict yourself, is subjective. You're allowed to be wrong, even if you're wrong, and that's okay. Being right is an arbitrary value that we are enforcing on ourselves, that I think I could reduce down to just subjectivity or intuition. And that's, I guess, what I'll say.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay,
so I'm not seeing any like specific questions in the VC text, but I understand that there is at least one person who would like to ask a question. I guess it's going to be of Lewis. In case anybody isn't aware of how this particular channel that we're in right now works, you need to just go in VC text, type your question. I can read it for you, or if you don't like me, somebody else can read it for you, or you can just ask to be unmuted, and then you can ask it in voice. So I'm gonna unmute Dread Caswary. I think he had a question. Dread, are you on the mic?
As a matter of fact, I'm on the mic.
Okay, go ahead. Ask your question.
So I heard you make the argument of how could when earlier on, and I may have misinterpreted the statement. When Zoom said, "I like chocolate cake," and then you said, "But how do you know you like chocolate cake?" Correct?
Yes. How do you know you like chocolate cake?
In my worldview, you cannot talk. You literally have no ability to pass air through your throat through your hyoid to create sound. Why can I still hear you?
I don't necessarily understand what you're trying to say there. Like,
Oh no. How can I hear you? How is it
So-
possible that you're speaking? I'm very confused.
I agree that would level us out into absurdity.
Okay, but why can I still hear you talk? Or can we? Or is it safe to assume that the experiences other people have are real? Or do you believe? Or do you believe? I'm sorry. Say again.
I never said that his experiences aren't real. I said that his judgments about those experiences might be wrong.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You don't understand. That's not what you said. You said his experiences, by definition, cannot be real because there's no way for him to know if they're right.
No, I said that they cannot be shown to be true. You cannot make knowledge claims about yourself.
Okay, so what you're saying is nothing is true.
No, what I'm saying is that truth is only possible between agents and not possible subjectively.
So if I establish a truth between another person and then have that truth somewhere else where that person is not.
I'd say that the establishment of truth between another person requires a level of deduction. Like, so you'd have to be able to instance and evidence any truth claim. You have to be able to prove
I need another person for that because I can deduce without another person.
Sorry, what?
Why can I not deduce without another? Why can I not make a deduction without another person in the room?
Let's say you cannot use language in a way that would allow you to understand that your interpretation of a word would be constant throughout that deductive process. So you wouldn't understand whether you were actually talking about the same thing or a different thing throughout the whole process.
Don't see how that's relevant. If I am in a room alone,
I'll give you a basic deduction of why it would be. So, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
I don't know how that statement is relevant.
Well, it's just to show you something. So, the word man is being held constant by a language, right? It's being held constant by.
That's not what I'm asking. Perspective. I'm not asking that question. Why do I require a second person in the room in order to make a deduction?
I'm saying you need metaphysically the thing that is being deduced to be common to our experiences. So, like, for example, man is common to experiences and held constant by multiple individuals who, judge the existence of man to be true, verify and falsify each other's positions, have an interpretation separate from the use of the word. So this is the important thing. So if I say the word man, I can use it correctly or incorrectly.
You're not answering my question, perspective.
I am answering your question.
No, you're actually not. You're going off into meta-ethics. I'm wondering why, if I'm in a room.
Actually,
philosophy. I'm not talking about philosophy.
Okay.
Because you're assuming the thoughts of another person.
Hold on.
By definition, you're assuming the thoughts of another person. You have to prove what they're saying is false.
Everybody.
No, what I'm saying is that you can't make an intuitional knowledge claim about yourself that references something that's purely private. That private things do not exist in the sense that I cannot know that they exist. You might experience it, and I can be like, "Oh, there's a private experience. I don't know what it is," but if it's purely private, then it cannot be described and known.
Why not?
Because that's not how language works. And if you don't want to explain the private language argument, then I recommend
we can't turn this into like every question can't turn into a massive debate. No, I wasn't getting at you at all. But do you consider your question answered? Even if you don't, there are other questions coming in. Conan Barbarian. I'm sorry, friend. I'm gonna have to mute you because
I'm just gonna quickly send this in chat in case the guy's interested.
Yeah, but by all means, absolutely, please do
Yeah,
that.
so this is the Stanford Encyclopedia on private language. Check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Unfortunately, me being tasked with being the mod, I have to read it. Right. So Conan Barbarin, I guess. He says for PP, that is you.
Hello.
He asks, "Is your vegan argument based on sentience? Question mark. For
It
Zoom,
is.
if you get drugged, raped, and you don't remember it, is rapist immoral?" That's what he's asking. I'm trying to keep up with the chat. It's kind of hard, but go ahead.
Okay, does PP want to answer first?
My argument is based on sentience. Yes.
Okay. I would argue that you have a intrinsic, that being a human being and having self-awareness, you would always have an intrinsic desire not to be raped, not to be drugged like that. And if you did that to someone, you would be violating that desire that they have. And that could be actualized via self-awareness that an animal could not have, because it could never have that. Really, it can never have a desire not to be killed in the same way a human could have a desire not to be raped. And there's a second reason, which is that the fear that something like this could happen to another person is another issue. Because let's say that individual doesn't know that they've been raped, we would now all live in fear that we could be drugged and raped. So there are multiple angles you could go at this by. That's my answer.
Thank you for your answer, good sir. We have
What if it was someone outside of our society though? So like we all, like you could do it to like we've only done it to people who are of a different nation, lower in power or something like that. Couldn't have any
Yeah,
recompense.
I would just appeal to the self-awareness thing, man. That was just one argument, but it's not my preferred argument. It would just go to the self-awareness and the narrative and the desire.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I hate to be the asshole mod, but there is another question to you, PP. It's from Ducker Z, and he asks, to PP, what is your view on history? How does it move forward? I appreciate that is a open question. I mean, like you could do a lot with that.
Yeah, so I mean, like someone, I don't know if this was meant because they understood that I'm a Hegelian and going to be arguing for a dialectical view of history, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing. But I'm going to say that the conceptual schemata of ethics is constantly progressing through reason. That we are actually getting better and better at understanding the world, and that's evidenced in other epistemological fields as well. Take physics. Our understanding of physics is getting better. I think our understanding of ethics is getting better, and I think that's why we're moving towards veganism now, because it's a greater ethical understanding of reality, from which we are able to understand the proper and the true understanding and true definition of equality in its application to the world. And so, yeah, I'd say that history progresses in line with human reasoning and evidentiary claims, the same way that onwards, the growth of the absolute spirit, if you will.
Thank you for your answer. I must remain zen at all times because I am not a debate participant. I'm merely the moderator. I'll go up and see if there's any further questions. There are some responses, but I don't want to read responses.
Shadow Starshine just asked a question. If you want to see in VC text.
Oh yeah, I do see that. Perspective. Do
go.
you see that? I can read
Yeah.
it out. Actually, I think I should read it out because other people are muted. So it says 4PP. I wonder, what do you even mean by normative, quote unquote? This term seems hyper conflated with different concepts. 2, do you take start quotes, X tastes good, end quotes, to be subjective.
I would say when I mean normative, I mean that there is
Actually, does Shadow wanna, like, does he want to get unmuted? I mean, I can unmute him, and he can.
Is he in the
Go on.
VC right now?
Yeah, he's
Oh, yeah.
he's in the VC. I'll unmute him, and if he wants to talk, he can.
so. I would have said with normative, I would have said that there is a you know a standard between agents from which the individual is engaged. You know,
That could sound though.
what? Sorry.
That could just be descriptive though.
Yeah, but I think that descriptive would be fine, except I think that, but I think that descriptive ethics requires language, and that I'm just saying that I don't think that you can describe non-cognitive states without the acceptance of something that's that is non-private. So I would say that I think that descriptivism could only work in a sense that subjectivism would be not necessarily true, and I think you'd have to rely on something like maybe like a Lacanian sense that the subconscious is structured like a language, which can be analyzed.
Well, what I'm hearing though is that your concept of normativity isn't actually in conflict with description.
It's not. It's
Like-
not. It's not in conflict with description. It's in conflict with describing something that's purely private.
Okay, in conflict with something strictly private, right? Because that does challenge some distinctions that people make between descriptivism and normativity.
Such as.
Well, just that normative statements are things like you should or you ought, those kind of phrases.
But I mean, like one of the things that Zoom was doing is obviously he was trying to build up a framework. You're not a prescriptivist, so you don't think that ethics is a you don't. I wouldn't even say you believe in ethics. You know, you essentially were describing like moral in the sense of a noun.
Well, I take moral to be a type of experience that's distinct from other experiences. So in that sense, I think there's some ethics.
So, but then ethics is like, so if I take ethics to be like pertaining to behavior, I would say that your judgments about how you should behave, would they be modified by, let's say, your description? Oh,
No.
no, that's the difference.
I mean, they
Okay.
can be because you can be motivated by description, but still the
Then that's at the
underlying
meta level,
ontology
isn't
would be the sensation that moves you.
Yeah, and then all you'd be doing with the description is, you know, describing you'd be producing another sensation on a sensation, right? So you'd be like feeling of a feeling.
Basically.
Yeah. I think that's very different than
Oh.
what Zoom was doing.
What is yeah, there was definitely divergence in the way he was describing it, right? Like, because I don't take axioms to be meaningful unless there's a certain ontology about the subject that it's referring to.
Like a good
And I do-
philosophical boy. Like,
And I do think you can be wrong about things, just like I could believe chocolate cake tastes good, but I haven't had it for a long time. I just believe that because the last time I had it, I enjoyed it, but maybe my taste has changed since then.
and
Right.
what would you be referencing in that belief state? What would you reference? For
I'd be referencing like my disposition. Like I guess I'm saying that I believe I'm the sort of entity that when I come in contact with this chocolate cake, I'm going to enjoy a pleasurable sensation.
and are you referencing the sensation, or let's say like
No, just the sorts of experiences that come into my, I guess, consciousness. We could use that word.
right? I guess like with the whole Frege embedding problem, one, I mean, it's like the issue is like a normative thing, trying to show that like your interpretation can't allow for an argument to function in terms of the existence of a private, non-cognitive, metaphysical entity. So like if you're talking about like so you basically said that it has to be ontologically, common, which I think we'll agree on. And when you're describing yourself, I think you describe yourself as being ontologically common in that. Is that, am I right?
Maybe. Depends what you mean by that. Like, I think I'm the sort of being that somebody else could know about just as much as I could know about. Of course, I'm the one actually having the experiences, so I'm going to have the first-hand knowledge that they don't have. But that doesn't mean, like, it's unknowable for somebody else.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I mean, you get situations like that all the time when
Okay,
somebody's just like, oh, I want to get back with that girl, and your friend's just like, don't be an idiot. You're miserable every single time. Don't be stupid.
Yeah, with this, it's very interesting and all that stuff. But somebody else is asking.
You sounded very enthusiastic there, Ian.
No, I'm just trying to moderate as fairly as I possibly can.
Okay,
I mean, like,
I'm out.
you know that.
We need a debate anyway, Shadow, separately.
What?
Right.
Like, yeah. So Shadow, next time, be me and you. How enter the ring.
Yeah, I'd certainly listen to that. But like moderating as fairly as I possibly can. There is a question. It's for Zoom. Here, it's Beans. Beans asks, why argue a moral system based only on intuitions from yourself? ? Like you said, you could never tell someone to follow it. That's the question that's being asked to you.
I think he missed the question there.
Yeah, his own connection issues.
Yeah, it's all right.
Having difficulty issues.
That's okay.
Okay.
Did you hear the question at all?
I see. I have two questions. One from Beans and one from Monstar.
Yeah, I read out the one from Beans, so if you can see that on your screen, otherwise I can read it out again if that's what you need.
I can see it. So I want to ask from Beans. So Beans, he said you could never tell someone to follow it. That's not really true. I can tell someone to follow my ethical system and convince them that it is in their best interest to follow my ethical system within their axioms. So like, if it's like, if they had these certain beliefs that were similar to mine, like similar base desires, I could convince them the best way to fulfill those base desires is by following my system. But if they rejected that and they said, no, I don't want to believe that, then there's nothing I could do. But yeah, that's what I would do, is I want to see the world in my image. I want to see my ethical system permeate the entire world. So that is what I would do. And that's how I reconcile my subjectivism with wanting to see my values, I guess.
So that would be it's called prescriptivism.
Okay. I guess I have a word for that now. Okay. All right. So then there's another question from Monstar. You want me to read it or you want to read it, SD?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Let me get back into VC text. Okay, so for Zoom, what is the argument of animals not being self-aware? The argument for animals not being self-aware is they've shown no signs of having self-awareness or of language capabilities outside of certain species. Okay, so and we can go into that more, Monstar, if you want to jump into VC, because I've talked to people about that a lot. So yeah, that's open to you. Okay, so I got another question. You want me to read it or you want to read it, SD?
Well, I mean, I'm trying not to read responses. So.
Or it's another question from Ducker Z.
Yeah, I'm seeing something different. It's from a friend of the server, but yeah, okay, you go right ahead.
What is
okay. Ducker Z asked, if you had to switch to veganism for whatever reason, how hard would it be? It would be a little difficult for me. Not impossible. I am an omnivore, but I'm not actually super into eating meat. I generally like bread and carbs more. So it would take some adjusting, but I think I could make it work if I truly had no choice or if I felt an ethical obligation to do it. So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
And was there another question there for me, or was that?
No, that was.
No, I
I
don't think it was.
Is that if?
All right.
Is it,
So
did it says for PP there, Jax? Is that? I mean, did we do that one? No,
I don't see that one.
if we do not assume, if we assume that animals do not know that they will die because they do not understand that other animals are dying,
Yeah, I
which
read
means
that.
they have a future than us. How can they enter in an ethical relationship with humans or animals? Is an animal not just afraid of instinct rather than death? Great question, to be honest. I would say that an animal does not fear death in the existential way that a human does. I would agree. But that does not mean that death is not a negative value for them. It's so, for example, if I see an animal, like if an animal sees another animal getting taken away, they might, miss the animal themselves. Like they might just miss the experience of having the animal theirs, and like they might feel the value of that experience and then it go. They may feel distress at seeing the animal leave. They might not know the animal is going to die. They might not feel like sadness and mourning in that respect, but they might mourn anyway in the sense that they might have an instinctual like association to those animals. We've seen other animals like seem to, get depressed and have those like sort of relationships with other animals without having the necessary linguistic capacities to understand like like knowledge claims about the world and stuff. Maybe understand like what's happened to the animal. And then I would say that also in terms of the value of their own life, the death of the animal is not what it's like. The death of a human is not necessarily good or bad. What makes the death of a human good or bad is in relation to the life that they've lived and the continuation of that life. If they were not to die. And this is where the idea of narrative comes in, because narrative is the understanding of life from moment to moment, not from moment to moment, but the continuation of moments throughout an entire, individual's, life expectancy, or how long we would expect a given individual live for, and then the quality of that life that is going to be lived or that is lived. So a lived quality is like an instanced value. A potentially lived quality, the future of an individual is a potential value. Now we could see that like euthanizing someone who is in a great deal of pain might be a good thing. Them dying sooner, that might be an actual good thing for them, because the life narrative then could be judged um, as being of a higher value. In terms of the animal, it could be the same thing, except for the continuation of their life. That ending their life would restrict their possible happiness, possible well-being, and otherwise diminish the values in which they can experience. And if the animal doesn't understand that narrative is taking place, it does not mean that they are not part of it, because we are the ones that understand and conceptualize the world. And when we are making these moral judgments, we can understand that that animal will experience those values regardless of their understanding of that narrative or not.
Right here. That's a very good statement to make. I think what we should do is have a quick lightning round. Are you happy with that? Anybody who wants to be unmuted, just type in the VC text that you want to be unmuted and we'll unmute you.
I was planning on, I've got to go and I think I actually don't know if Dave is oh no, Dave's not coming on. I was wondering if Dave's coming on to the stream, but it's he's not. But it's okay. I can do a couple of minutes, but I will bounce.
Yeah, that's all right. Couple of minutes suits me perfectly fine. If you want to be unmuted, you can hear my voice. Just say in the VC text you want to be unmuted, and I'll unmute you. You can ask a question.
All right. Yeah, I'm actually gonna be here for a while. So if you guys want to ask me something, if anyone who's watching the stream wants to come into the server, we're in the Slaughterhouse on Discord.
Yeah,
if you guys want to come in and ask me some questions, insult me, roast me, you know, I'm right here. Come at me.
I'll link it in PP's chat.
Okay,
It
cool.
should be in the description as well. So if anyone's interested, it is in the description.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's fine. I just thought that more people would have a question for you, but
Don't be nasty, guys.
I'm not being nasty.
Oh, not you,
I'm always
not you.
nice to you. Come on, man.
He was asking to be roasted. Just because he thinks he wants to be roasted doesn't mean that he's actually right about it.
All right.
Oh God.
Anybody who wants to roast Zoom.
Is that a way of low-key roasting me perspective?
If anybody wants to be unmuted, just type in VC text, I want to be unmuted. That's it. That's all you'll have to type.
Yeah,
Okay, somebody-
Zoom, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
apart from
so,
you,
like,
I mean, like black black people.
So why? Shut up. So why are you? My question is why are you a little bitch? Tell me in 5 words or less, objectively. Yes, thank you. You wanted a
Because
roast, you got it.
I want to be.
Because you want to be.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Good answer.
All right.
Also, just to clarify to my chat, pretty sure that SD and Paddy are good friends and that it was actually a joke between them.
I've never met her before. I just hate black people.
Nah, I hate him because he's Welsh.
It's okay, cool guys. Just so I don't get banned from YouTube. Right.
No, I wouldn't. If you
I'm
need
gonna
to chop
bounce,
that bit
guys.
out, that's fine.
I'm gonna bounce, guys. So I hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and I'll talk to you all later.
Yeah, and thank you for showing up. Nice of you to partake, and thanks to Zoom for having a debate with you. And sorry we couldn't get to more questions, but hey, there's always round 48 or something, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But thanks
So
again.
Yeah.
Everyone, if you want to check out this server, remember it's the Slaughterhouse Discord. It's in the description below.
And by the way,
Zoom. And
just before you leave, I want to say I'll also, if you allow me, I may join the comment section of this video when you finally finish streaming, and I can also talk to people there if they miss me on the Slaughterhouse. So
right.
You're fine with that, right?
Probably I'm gonna unlist this video and then put it up separately, like because I've been essentially editing, because I'll be doing a Q&A, so I'll edit it to just the debate. I'll send you it once it's up, and then you can comment there.
You can use my video.
Okay.
It's fine.
But yeah, thanks again as well, Zoom, and thank you everyone for being so patient. I'm sorry that I was a bit late. So yeah, I hope you all have a lovely day.
That's all right. We know vegans can't be on time.
I know it's the lack of B12, it just makes you lose psychological continuity from time to time.
Yeah. I'm glad you realised this, man. Finally.
But it's okay because it doesn't matter for moral consideration. But anyway, I'll see you all there.
Go and do your stream. Have a good night.
All right, see you, man. Okay.
Is it really a slaughterhouse debate if I don't call someone a bitch?